The funny thing about psychoproctology, if I have to tell you what's funny about psychoproctology, we're in trouble. This is my conversation with Jeremy Sherman, PhD. What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hirsch Redpun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. My guest today is Jeremy Sherman, PhD. He could be described as a cradle-to-grave science researcher, writer studying the unbroken chain of the origins of life. But that's not why I have Jeremy on Truth Tastes Funny today. He's also the author of the Columbia University Press book, Neither Ghost Nor Machine, The Emergence of Nature of Selves. That's not why I have Jeremy on the show today. He's also authored 1,000 articles with 9 million readers for Psychology Today. But even that is really not why I have Jeremy on the show. His latest book is called What's Up with Assholes? How to Spot and Stop Them Without Becoming One. That's a good reason. That's a good place to start. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. And now I'm up to 10 million views.
Wow.
Yes, so I only have another nearly 7 billion people to convert to my way of thinking, and then I'll have my mission will be accomplished.
Well, if you can do that 10 million at a time, you know,
yes, that's
how
right.
I feel. If I can change the life of just 10 million people, then I will have done something.
That's true, because very few of us have that much we meet that quota. Though in a way we all do, because we all end up influencing each other directly and indirectly.
Right.
Yeah, can't help but change people.
Well, I'm really glad to have you on, and it certainly resonated with me. That last book title did, as did the fact that you've written articles about total jerks. And jerks and assholes is enough to fill any podcast.
It's true. Timely topic.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's amazing that there are almost as many assholes in the world as there are people. But
exactly.
Let's start there. Let's start with that, and we can go all over the place. But let's start with that title in the context of what it is that you study. Is that
yes,
connected?
No,
those two?
Yeah, very
okay.
connected. All my work is connected, which makes it a little complicated because I'm always seeing these connections. So for the last, I'd say 20 years, I've been playing with a koan. What is a butt head, since it can't just be whoever I happen to butt heads with? That is, everybody's got their subjective definition of an asshole. But I was thinking that only leads to asshole on asshole battle, to people accusing each other of being assholes. So I got interested in a more objective, I don't think you can be absolutely objective about it, but a more objective approach to defining this category that is one of the most popular terms in what we call folk psychology, that is everyday psychology, how people talk about psychology, and yet doesn't really have a name in clinical psychology. It's a diagnostic category. It seems to me broader than narcissist and psychopath, or what we call these days a dark triad personality. And I wanted to try to understand what it is that is going on with assholes.
Right.
And also how do you stop them? That is, how do you disappoint them? Because my sense is that if we don't figure out ways to humbly humble people who will say or do anything to avoid humility, we will go extinct. That is, I think it's an even bigger problem. I spent a whole decade working on climate change and nuclear issues. I think it's a bigger issue. It's a wetware problem. Humans have this tendency to become assholes, or what I consider to be the plural for asshole, which is cult. And if we don't figure out better ways to antidote and inoculate against that tendency, we're in a lot of trouble. The major havoc is caused by people who become assholes with a whole lot of power. So how to stop that, how to diagnose it, how to treat it, and how to prevent it. And believe it or not, it relates to humor, because the one thing these guys aren't is these people aren't assholes aren't is ironic.
Yeah.
They are hypocritical. It's interesting how close hypocrisy is to irony. With both, you're talking out both sides of your mouth. But there's a radical difference between them. So yes, they're pathological hypocrites, but they're not ironic. And so it actually does relate to humor. And humor is, I think, one of the ways to antidote it.
And it's interesting that humor helps us deal with assholes, but it has no effect on them for the reasons you describe. In other words, they don't get the joke. So it doesn't help. It only maybe makes them angrier, maybe makes them even more petty. You mentioned climate and nuclear issues, and I think that to a great extent, assholes are responsible for the problems being as dire as they are in those areas, because that's in large part, you could say money and other things, but in large part, I think assholeness stands in the way of progress on climate, progress on nuclear peacekeeping. Tell me a little bit about about diagnosing an asshole, because you can get cut off in traffic and make the judgment that somebody's an asshole, but you really don't know.
Yeah. So this is related to my origins of life work. So I work among scientists on the physical origins of selves and trying. That wall behind you isn't trying to do anything. Your computer isn't trying to do anything, but all organisms try. And so trying takes energy, but the problem with energy is that it generally degenerates things. A windstorm isn't going to organize your papers. So one of the fundamental things that all organisms have to do is they have to take in the right energy and not the wrong energy. The energy they can use to regenerate themselves, not just reproduce. We have to regenerate ourselves. Today, I have a slouchy day planned for me, but I'm still going to generate 330 billion new cells today. And I'm going to do this without thinking or feeling. I have to regenerate myself all the time. So that takes energy. I have to eat in order to do that. I have to breathe oxygen, all that sort of stuff. At the same time, I can't eat poison. I can't, there are all sorts of energetic gradients, we call them, that would destroy me. So I've got this kind of relationship with the world. I've got to take in the right energy, not the wrong energy. Now with humans are a radically different critter, and that's largely because of language. We have language which enables us to imagine all sorts of things, really imagine anything. Not just talk about it, but think about it. That makes us an incredibly anxious species. When you compare what your dog could worry about before bedtime to what you could, it's just no contest. You can worry, a human can worry about way more than a dog can. Okay, and with language, what I was just talking about, this relationship takes the form of confirmation bias, which is the tendency to take in ideas, to eat ideas that affirm us, and to keep out ideas that disaffirm us. So we all got mojo to maintain. We're an anxious species. We all need our mojo. And for that, we are very selective about what news we interact with. Now, normal, decent people, they know that confirmation bias is a problem they have to manage. Assholes treat confirmation bias as the solution to all their problems. And we all engage in the same kind of behaviors as assholes. We all lie. We all engage in hypocrisy. I'm not stating a cynical opinion. I'm stating what all the evidence shows in psychological research. But the difference is in the concept of absolutism. So you remember that saying, absolute power corrupts, power
absolutely.
corrupts, absolute power
Right.
corrupts absolutely. That's not actually the original statement. The original was, power tends to corrupt. Just like lying tends to corrupt. Hypocrisy tends to corrupt. It doesn't always. Sometimes it's just what the doctor ordered. You really we have to lie to get through life.
Right.
Okay, but when you go to the absolute, it does corrupt absolutely. And the word absolute actually means dissolved away from. That is, you are not influenced by anything else. You are literally incorrigible. Nothing could correct you. So being an asshole has nothing to do with your tone of voice. You can be a really mellow Mike Pence asshole. There are all sorts of, there are definitely women assholes who engage in what I call yin-timidation, which is the yin form of intimidation. There's also, any style, any belief, it's got nothing to do with what you claim to believe. Because assholes don't actually believe. They have a higher goal, which is remaining incorrigible. That is, they don't want, the freedom they want is freedom from ever having to learn or change. And they'll learn any technique that enables them to do that. So I think I will never use the words Trump believes or Trump thinks. I don't think that's the level at which it's operating. I think it's operating at a much more visceral, it's closer to animal braying than it is to human thinking. And one of the ways they dupe normal people is by getting normal people to think that they're actually saying something. They're not. They're just braying. It's a kind of animal noise.
Also, Jeremy, to see, I think they succeed at convincing people that they believe something also, and I think that's like once that's happened, and you don't realize that an asshole is incapable of thinking and believing, you're almost lost. You've almost given yourself up because
That's right.
You are now putting them in a whole different category. It's like having a dog and putting them in a category of a lawnmower and saying, well, if I shake the dog fast enough, it'll just mow the entire lawn. Because an asshole can't do the things that you want them to do, right? They can't believe in something.
Well,
they can't say, "Oh, you know what? I had an epiphany, and it was wrong to harm this person."
Yes. So there's lots of complicated issues around it. I think that they choose whether they can't, they won't, or they think they shouldn't be more receptive. It becomes a blur. So we often wonder whether they're stupid or stupid like a fox. I think it's to their advantage to not change. It's very hard to change them. A minute ago you said humor doesn't work on them. I want to argue that nothing works on them. And yet that doesn't keep me from trying to figure out what works on them best. And I will argue that humor at their expense can be effective when there's an audience. Obviously, you deal with this when you're dealing with hecklers in stand-up comedy. That is, doing something at their expense. Now, I have friends who say, I still have hippie friends who say, you got to be nice, you got to be kind all the time. I took a walk yesterday with one of them, the founder of Move On. And she still tends that way, and I still give her a hard time about it. I say, no, that works with people on the fence. It doesn't work with someone who has gotten addicted to what I call Trump botting. So Trump botting is robotically playing trumped up, fake Trump cards. That's all it is. It's a small t Trump. I think Trump is a perfect Trump bot. Ideal, quintessential, because it's very hard to figure out what he believes, even though he declares it like it trumps all other considerations. But I mean it's something small t. You can be a Buddhist Trump bot. You can be an atheist Trump bot. You can be a humanist Trump bot. It's that combination of a wild card. I can do anything I want, and whatever I do, it's a trump card. It beats all other possibilities. And by the way, I'd say that's exactly what any organism would want. We'd want total freedom and total safety. And that's what you get. Total freedom is the wild card. Total safety is the trump card. Nothing can beat you. It's basically playing God.
As though you had the divine power. What stops us from doing so many things is that we have a barometer that tells us that we can't get away with certain things. And we've been taught that there are consequences. And somewhere we believe that there's consequences, and maybe we learn right from wrong, but we still are stopped by propriety, protocol, guilt.
Yeah.
Conscience. Fear, conscience. Thank you. But the asshole does not. Then they seem to win over.
That's
people.
The interesting point. That's the interesting
Yes.
point. So in order to prioritize you winning no matter what, you have to become detached from reality. And it turns out, this is one of the disappointing pieces of news. I would say it's probably the most disappointing news of my life. Crime does pay. When you detach from conscience, being an asshole pays if you can get away with it. So that's why a lot of my work's also on how to keep them from being able to get away with it. How to disappoint assholes is kind of fundamental to my work. But apparently you can get away with a whole lot of it. People who act like they can do no wrong end up doing a whole lot of wrong. And unless there are consequences for it, they won't stop. Even if there are consequences for it, they often won't stop. Think of what it would take to cold turkey off of the asshole lifestyle. It would be excruciating. And for another thing is you've done a bunch of stuff that you couldn't possibly justify without your BS justifications. That you give them up, you're suddenly on the line for a bunch of things. If you can figure out a way to get rid of your conscience, and can get away with it, why would you ever want it back? It only gets in the way.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the proposition that Jeffrey Epstein didn't commit suicide makes perfect sense, because he didn't seem, by anyone's evaluation, to be the kind of person that's going to feel remorse, suffer from hopelessness, that kind of thing. But the people on the other side of that equation would have no compunction about killing him, because that would fit their profile.
Sure, that's right. Yes. Now there is a version, one subtle counter argument is that these guys conceivably could kill themselves before they lived in the shame of having been exposed or sent to jail or something like that. We don't see a lot of that. We see Hitler committing suicide would be one example of it. So I'm not saying that's an argument why he actually committed suicide. But I certainly agree with you. The remorse would not be part of that package. It's not likely to. Because you read all the character studies of these guys, and they have simplified life down to a game. It's simply maximum likes. Nothing else matters. What you say doesn't matter. What you care about doesn't matter, to the point where caring only becomes an inconvenience. It's simply a game of amassing as much power, profit, and pleasure as you can, and there's no end to it. So.
Now there are different levels of asshole, right? You have different kinds of assholes. You have an asshole like Trump, or an asshole like Putin, or an asshole. You could name a number of assholes.
Like Stalin. That is, it's nice to balance it out. There are leftist assholes
right.
as well as right. It's a lifestyle choice.
Yes, exactly. But then you have the asshole enablers who are also assholes, and I often wonder what's in it for them. They might be doing things to the detriment of mankind, to the detriment of their political party, or, let's say they did have not even beliefs, but they had when they're enabling such destructive forces, what compels them? I see that as very relevant to a couple features of my work. One version of it is that
that difference that you just described is simply a function of how high up you are on the pyramid scheme. So there are people who you would call dupes. They're just gullible, they're education deprived, they fell in, they're surrounded by a community that has all become cultish one way or another, and they just go along with the program. You wouldn't talk about them necessarily profiting, but you would talk about them as avoiding the costs of defying their local society. But the higher you get up on that scale, that is, once they've joined the pyramid scheme, and once it becomes profitable, it changes. That is, they become more like the asshole leaders, the more profit they take from it. But I want to suggest a different cut. So there are cult leaders and there are cult followers, and then there are solo assholes. And that is the asshole who claims no greater cause than cause I said so. And they're interesting because so the cultists, it's kind of easy to see. In response to your question, I'd say, well, you surrender your individuality, you surrender your ego, you become humbled and humiliated for an ego upgrade. This is something only humans can do. We can identify with some brand or larger entity. We can even die for God or country. But that's because we're identifying ourselves with this grander thing. So if I'm a $2 person who takes a downgrade to $1 person to be part of $1 million movement, that'll feel like an upgrade to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now what about the solo asshole? What about the guy who's got an asshole without a cause? That's just because I said so. I have a new theory about that, which I just worked out, and I'm going to post it as a video tomorrow. These are people who are playing God, but they are also playing God's apostle. There's a splitting that goes on where you suddenly start identifying with your idealized image of yourself, what you could become or what you claim to have become, that you're somehow enlightened or whatever. You latch onto that, and then you become the most vicious bulldog protector of that self. So one of the interesting characteristics of assholes is that they will shame you for not living up to principles, but in the next breath they'll laugh at you about caring about principles. They played prude and punk. So that's an interesting split. You get that perfectly in the Trump movement, which alternates between what I call fundamentalist hypocrisy, which is I know the rules, not that I live by them, and the other one, which is that there are no rules, and you're a loser if you think there are. And they'll just oscillate fluidly between them. Well, when they're laying down the law, they're playing God. When they're acting like there are no rules, they're playing God. That is, they are free to do anything. You say playing king. And by the way, for a king, hypocrisy is a status symbol. That is, they can be impulsive.
They're allowed to be. Yeah,
they're allowed to be. So when they're playing king impulsively and acting like there are no rules they have to follow, that's their idealized self. And when they bark at you for giving a hard time to their idealized self, that's them being their own best apostle. Their bulldog. So it's a theory I'm playing with that helps explain how a solo asshole works. They are operating like the soldier defending a false, idealized image of themselves.
Well, it's interesting because if you recall, Trump acted as his own publicist under a
exactly.
nom de plume, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right.
And that makes total sense because here he is operating, playing the role that needs to be played because he's so connected to that need.
That's right.
Of defending, and he knows that third-party validation is helpful.
Right.
He doesn't.
Right. Yeah. So it's a difference between second guessing yourself and second yesing yourself. So with second yesing, it'd be like I said, no, I must be right. I checked with myself 3 times, and every time I agreed with myself. So isn't that proof enough?
Well, it falls under the, a lot of people are saying,
No, very much
having
so.
an idea and
Yeah.
then throwing it out there. Now, several years ago, I think a lot of us, in the United States and wherever else, but we're starting to pay attention to Trump's certain kind of asshole that he is, and because it represented a threat and it was just perplexing and it was crazy for certain people to look at it,
Yeah,
and
we
watch
didn't
it.
expect it at that.
We didn't
at that-
expect that,
Yeah.
in any real powerful, influential way. A lot of assholes were operating behind the scenes. They're assholes that don't want to be, that are not, narcissists, I guess you would say, or not, don't crave the spotlight in the same way. They prefer the shadows because that's where they can operate.
Yeah,
more effectively.
and yeah, it's not that they can well be narcissists, but they, as a function of looks or style or
Right.
whatever, they're better as Svengalis behind the scenes. But
Right.
there's a great new book. I read it twice, and yet I can't remember its name, by someone who had been deep inside the Trump movement early on, but was gay and eventually broke with them. And it gives you a sense of what these people are like, a Lindsey Graham or some
Yeah.
sycophant like that. They want to be in the room where it happens. These are guys who didn't get action in high school and are still craving it. They never got over that neediness because they never quite got enough of it, or there couldn't be enough of it. Whatever. So one way or another, they can be narcissists behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, as we have this conversation, and yes, I have views about politics. I would imagine that most people who care about the country they live in and would care about their politics, and I respect other people's opinions. I think that there's an attempt made often by people who will say, well, all politicians are assholes, all politicians are corrupt, it's the same on this side as it is on that side.
Sure, you get that false equivalency.
So now that person isn't, in my view, an asshole necessarily. They could be a victim, they could be radicalized, they could be a dupe, they could be. But what do you make of people who are? What draws people to assholes who were previously, at the very least, rational on some level? In other words, what accounts for their march toward complete irrationality?
Yeah. So, from rational to rationalizing would be one way to describe it, and it's just way easier to play God if you can get away with it than being human. It's just easier. So from my perspective, there's a detour to assholia off of any path you're on. It's a slippery slope. There are huge efficiency advantages. And that we would be, during a time like this, when the world is getting way more complex and changing faster than we have ever thought, there would be plenty of people who just feel like they can't navigate the squirrely, winding roads of life and figure out what exits to take and all of that. And so they kind of close their eyes and start driving in a straight line. And as long as other cars get out of their way, their hands are basically off the wheel. And that would be a natural human response, because in addition to language making it very easy for us to feel anxious, it makes it very easy for us to rationalize away anything we might be anxious about. So I work with astrobiologists. These are people who are trying to understand life as what we would be looking for as life elsewhere in the universe. And I will make the argument that anywhere you'd have intelligent life forms, intelligence defined by a capacity to use symbols or language, not animal sounds, but language. It's an important difference that's often overlooked. Anywhere in the universe, even if they weren't carbon-based, would be having these problems. I'll argue that climate change has probably happened quite a great many times in the universe, as has climate change denial. That is, I suspect that anywhere you got language, you can do this kind of rationalizing. Now, I mentioned a minute ago, I want to catch one thing. You said false equivalent. I want to declare that I am a liberal conservative. I'm a progressive traditionalist. I'm a libertarian socialist. What do I mean by that? Those brandings are bullshit. Nobody wants to change everything, and no one wants to keep everything the same. They're rationalizations that we use after the fact. I would say this about all of these morally loaded terms. I am kind and unkind. I don't believe that kindness is the answer. I think that kindness is the question. Where to be kind, where not to be kind. I think that's true of all of those words. But we tend to try to turn it into, if I need to use a move like kindness or unkindness, like love, let's say, if I want to use a move, then I'll maybe motivate myself and overgeneralize it as though love is the answer. It is not the answer. It is the question. What to love, what not to love. So what to keep the same, what to loosen, what to tighten. We stunt our growth on those questions through this kind of virtue grandstanding as if a word, a moral word, is a recipe for good. It's a question about what to do in what situations. So even though I grew up a counterculture leftist hippie, I worked for a while for Eli Lilly, and one of the vice presidents said to me there, he said, "Jeremy, I know you cut off your ponytail, but I still see it," he said. So no, I'm definitely of that culture. But I'm even maybe more deeply rooted in Chachma, which I always took to be paradoxical wisdom. Wisdom, yeah. It's paradoxical wisdom. That's how we ended up Talmudic, is that when we saw a contradiction, like love is good and love is bad, or kindness is good, kindness is enabling, whatever, any version of that, we would dig into it. That was kind of our gift, and it shows up. I'll argue that's why I'm an ironist. That is, and I mean that in the philosophical as well as the humorous sense. Life is dire. You guess wrong what to love or what to not love, you could die. It's also exactly the same thing as slapstick. You make a good bet and it comes out wrong. You thought you had traction on the ground, but there's a banana peel there. And you slip and fall on your ass instead of propelling yourself forward. Life is dire. Life is slapstick. And the ironist recognizes that. The hypocrite exploits it, but doesn't recognize it. They only have to be one thing. They only have to be consistent about one thing, which is the claim that they're consistent. A hypocrite can slop any way they want. They just have to pretend they're consistent. An ironist is always winking, which is one of the earliest ideas I had in my work is no matter how hard I chase the truth, it will never catch me. Yeah. So anyway, I'm an ironist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's so much.
Sorry, it can be a lot.
No, that's good. It's good. No, it's
great.
great.
This stuff all day.
It's great, Jeremy. Well, because I am fascinated by people who are compassionate, thinking, educated, reasonable people in most areas of their life. Yeah. And I think they must have, and I've come to this conclusion as well as your statement, that they must have part of that desire for conformity. Look, Orthodox Judaism. I was raised Orthodox.
Yeah. Me too, by the way.
Yeah. Where were you raised?
I was in Chicago, and to be honest, I was raised in an Orthodox school, but my parents were more Reformed than that, which is very different from your situation. But a serious man, that was my culture. It was mid-'60s, Midwest.
Right, I get it.
Jewish day school.
Yeah,
fabulous movie.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's interesting because now living in the Midwest, I see how that evolves. Growing up in Miami Beach, going to college in New York, I was much more privy to the Orthodox kind of
right.
upbringing.
And where you are, things are more negotiable.
Yeah, exactly. And what I realized was that as I would see the emergence of Trump, and there was a little resistance, and then some of them get on board, and then they kind of get on board, and it's either Israel or it's something else, but they find their connection in there.
Yeah.
And once they've made that connection, with few exceptions, it seems, they cannot completely disconnect from it. They can say that something was wrong or cruel or mean or hurtful, but they will rationalize why it's excusable.
Sure.
I thought my joke, and you know, we share this idea that humor is our kind of our saving grace, if anything, or our survival, tool.
Both, yes.
My reaction after some of the things that would go on would be, well, it's at least it's nice to see the Jews and the Nazis working together, because here they are marching for Trump. Of course, the Jews don't go to the Nazi rallies.
They skip that part
Nazis,
of the
Nazis
lifestyle.
Don't invite the Jews to the. But
No, that's right.
the people. They
never hide. They never call.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I don't need to be in the parade. Let them go to the parade.
Exactly.
But do me a favor. This Jews won't replace us. I'm going to replace you. What do I want to? What I want to replace you? You're wearing half a shirt. Your belly's coming out from there. All this nothing.
That's right.
Come on. Why do I want to replace I'm going to replace a skinhead. First, let him grow a head of hair,
Yeah.
But it's like, this idea that you would that there's this uncomfortable thing of, okay, I'm supporting a political movement that embraces, not just racism, anti-Semitism, Nazism. Now you have the whole Kanye West thing, which is, I'm really reluctant to give much air to his mania, because he's trying his best to be an asshole. He's truly a mental patient who I don't know what's like. He literally is. I'm interested in your take on that, because, because I don't want to dismiss it as just here's a terrible person. I'm curious as to what makes somebody self-destruct that.
Right. So this relates to my my approach to asshole prevention. What I described before is that we are through language, we are a more anxious and more escapist creature than others. That is, we can rationalize it, ignoring things. Like I said, that would be true of any organism that has language. Just given the way that language enables us to live in another world, to be legends in our own mind. My approach is we need to cultivate optimal illusion. We need to be better at strategic gullibility, fooling ourselves in the right ways and not the wrong ways. Safe escapism is the heart of my approach to asshole prevention. So for me, there is a difference between religion and masturbation and watching movies and playing Grand Theft Auto, but it's not the difference that people assume. Or I've been to a Trump rally, and it's exactly like going to a death metal concert, except for one difference. So you get all cosplayed up, and you go and you chant a bunch of lyrics that you haven't actually thought about. They just make you feel badass. That's what you do at a death metal concert. That's what you do at a Trump rally. The difference is that, or to take another example, just to put it out there, when I jerk off, I am fantasizing that I have more appeal than I do, let's say. I am imagining an idealized version of things. And then when I'm done, I zip up and I get back to reality. It's not about how far out you go. It's about whether you remember to come back. So after the death metal concert, the difference between a Trump rally and a death metal concert is what happens in the parking lot. In the parking lot after a death metal concert, people start to take off their obvious cosplay, and they get back to their reality. After a Trump rally, or after certain church services, people think that because they've revved out on it, they have experienced something more real than reality. That's the only danger. Safe escapism has me at night identifying with heroes as though I would obviously take the harder course when, no, I wouldn't. I'm like any other human being. There's no reason to assume that I would be the hero. But after the TV goes off, I return to my life's work. So I take my flights of fancy, but always with a return ticket to reality in my heart pocket. I'm not claiming that about myself. I'm saying that's the goal of safe escapism, is that you go as far, you need that mojo pit stop. You need, after a hard day, you need some moments, or after a hard week, you need some moments where you feel like you're on God's side, you're God's ally, that you know the path, you're on the path, you're assured heaven. But that's not reality, and you need to be able to distinguish between them. So for me, there's a difference. I say, I believe in science, or I think that a religious person might be healthiest if they said, I believe in science, I relieve in religion. I get my relief that way. I drain the lizard that way. The lizard brain that wants to live in a world other than the one we're in.
Yeah.
It needs. We need it. We need it. We can't survive without it.
We definitely need it. I think what's happened is we've crossed a line between the round trip ticket and the one-way ticket, where it started out, reality television. It's a form of entertainment. Is it really kind of base and numbing? Yeah. Do we need a little mind-numbing entertainment? Yeah. And then you see a film like Idiocracy where it personifies what we fear, and now we've exceeded it beyond our wildest nightmares. And it becomes real, and
we act as though it's real. I don't think it.
Well, it becomes real in the sense that January 6th happens. It's not.
Oh no, the reality kicks in. We get reality bitch slaps. We're getting cosmic wedgies from it. That's right.
Yeah,
that's
some
right.
of them are awake to it. Some of them came out of that feeling deceived and screwed over. They may not have completely come back to their senses, but they
a few get sober, but most will. So that's my worst prognosis for humankind is a dissociation death spiral. That is, people check out of reality, neglecting it, it gets worse, and as a result, that's more motivation for them to check out of reality. And that's likely for us. And I would say an antidote to that is stand-up comedian. So let me just put in a plug for you here. I think there's no better church service out there these days than stand-up comedy. Because what you're doing, not all of it, you've got Gutfeld kind of comedy, which is not actually, it's not ironic at all, it's just snark. It's what I call we glee, the glee of being us wise ones as compared to the fools out there. Well, really good, the kind of stand-up comedy I appreciate is laughing at and with each other. Yeah. And I can think of no better communion than that. Than that business of sitting there and laughing at the human predicament. That there's no escaping ironic situations. That you can minimize them, but you can't escape them completely. Where the right thing comes out wrong or the wrong thing comes out right, and we're trying to guess, and life is iffy. So in philosophy, it's called fallibilism. The recognition that no matter how confident I am in a bet, I have to remain still more confident that it is a bet. That everything's betting. I think that's the biggest cosmic wedgie from Darwin. Not that there's no God, not that we descended from apes, but that it's all guessing. That you can make a good move that turns out bad, or a bad move that turns out good, and you can try to minimize that as much as you can, but you can't eliminate it. And that makes life the sitcom it is. The tragic sitcom. So I love it for that reason. That's why I love humor. I mean, no, I love humor because it tickles me and soothes me. But my deeper intellectual appreciation of it comes from that fundamental. I'm an ironic fallibilist. That's my technical name for this school of thought. That's what you call these people. And Socrates was the first famous ironist. Because though there are people who study him all day and all night, he had no school of thought. He did not have a doctrine. That's an interesting thing about those guys. He didn't have a doctrine. You can't become a Socratic in the sense of following his code. He doesn't have a moral code. He's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, there's no absolute.
Right.
In that,
but the craving for it is perfectly understandable. I can see why we'd want them.
And in terms of stand-up, that's why now there's within stand-up a move toward whatever you want to call it, political correctness, cancel culture, where comedians there's an attempt to, both within and without that industry, to censor comedy, because it is, in many ways, as a friend of mine used to call, the last bastion of free speech. That stand-up comedy is one of the few places you're likely to get truth, and the fact that it's couched in irony is what makes it digestible.
Yes.
And hence the success of Jon Stewart, although now he's pretty much removed that because society has so lost its its compass.
He's trying to find his way, and obviously there are plenty of successors to him. But the political so comedy has always surfed the edge. That's its goal. And to your point, there are no court jesters for fascists. If you're looking for a canary in the coal mine, look at the court jesters. They don't survive that transition. They have an interesting history, the way they surf the edge and are tolerated. It's fascinating how they're tolerated. And I have found that in my life, I can get away with saying a whole lot more of what I honestly believe, as long as I do it with a self-effacing, ironic humor. It's a great lubricant. That is, I have to convey that I know I'm guessing. My Facebook handle is Jeremy Unsure Sherman.
I saw that.
IMO has to be all over my work. This is guesswork. It's careful guesswork. There's a difference. It's not like saying all guesses are equal. They aren't.
Yeah.
But it's also So that's where it lives. And I've been long fascinated by why, as a culture moves towards fascism, the resistance to fascism often gets more prudish. And part of this is just a feature of countercults. So you got cults and then you get countercults. A standard example would be that the Soviet communism inspired it was a cult that inspired the libertarian cult. They're both full of shit. But they do inspire each other. That is, there's a tendency to circle your wagons in response to other people circling your wagons. Part of it is also, hey, let's all be nice, because if we can figure out how to be nice, if we can behave honorably, if we can, when they go low, we go high, kind of nonsense. Mm-hmm. They don't go low, they go low and high, and we don't deal with it effectively if we just act righteous, because they simply can call all of that PC. And disparage it while being more woke. The Trump movement is by far the wokest, most PC movement in the country these days. I live in Berkeley. You live in... So we know what liberals are like. And yeah, I do know a few people. There's a house down the street that's still got a sign out in front that says... it's talking about Obama's war crimes. We do get a couple of those people who have no sense of perspective at all.
Right.
But they're really rare. And so, it's very important to me to recognize, and Bill Maher is just falling flat on his face on this in his effort to widen his audience, I suspect. No, if you want to talk about PC and woke, they are not a leftist thing. You can brand them to that. They are a move that has been around for centuries, for millennia, where people suddenly think they've seen the light and they've got the answers now. And you don't get a stronger version of that in the country right now than the MAGA movement. It's the wokest thing around.
Yeah. So how do you describe, the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing and the Ron DeSantis and now I know this has been a long time coming. None of this stuff happened overnight. But this, it's almost like if you get an erector set in the mail,
Yeah.
and you don't even know anything. You don't know anything about anything.
Right.
And you're 5 years old, and you open the box, and there's no instructions or anything, and you just start putting it together by instinct. It's like that seems to be what happened with the Republican Party. It's almost like organically they knew exactly how to get in line with all of this.
Yeah.
It immediately came together like an erector set. It was effortless. All they had to do was not have a conscience, not have any
claim to have
platform.
the most conscience, but not have any conscience. That's right.
claim everything, claim
It's
to
a
feel and have
branding
everything
move.
and have none.
Yeah, so it's a branding move and has always been a branding move. So we think when we've seen the light, we're falling in love with ideas. We're not. We're falling in love with the freedom from doubt. That's what people, they think they joined for the cause, but they're staying for the swagger. That's the satisfaction of it. There is, I said there was a detour to assholia off any path in life. That's true. It's especially true of supernatural paths, because you can believe anything you want about it and it trumps everything. It's super. So proud, infallible faith is going to be you could say a gateway drug, especially if you start to think it's real. But you'll start to think it's real as long as you can get away with it, and people have gotten away with it in part because my culture made a big thing out of universal tolerance. They wouldn't face into the problem. I mentioned it earlier. Tolerance sounds good, but always be tolerant means also be intolerant of intolerance. We weren't dealing with it because we were living in this cushy, safe era back in the 60s when we thought that everything was going to simply tip towards the Aquarian age and everybody would see the light and become nice. And we have kept that going for so long that they do get away with it. And it has become a boomtown with anxiety up across humankind and all of this permission to dissociate from reality. It becomes a very clear path that's thrilling to someone who, it's like the nouveau riche. They never thought they'd be the pundits being called on TV, and now they're being called on TV all the time. That proves that they're right, as though popularity proves accuracy. There's a piece of graffiti, eat shit, 3 trillion flies can't be wrong. No, popularity doesn't prove that you're right. Lots of things are universally believed, and no, they're not right. But if you treat popularity as the only name of the game, and you continue to use it as a source of success when it's serving you, when it's not serving you, so these are self-winding movements. No matter how you shake them, they get wound up. If you disagree with them, it proves that they're martyr heroes. They're victims, just like Jesus. If you agree with them, it proves they were right all along. No matter what, they're right. That is, right or wrong, I'm right. So it must give them hair boners. They must be so thrilled to have discovered this stuff. The hair boners, piloerection, that's the term for goosebumps.
Piloerection. I've been writing
hair
certain
boners.
things down.
Yeah, it actually it is related, because what it is, piloerection is goosebumps are an evolved trait in. It evolved because we used to have hair and hackles that we would puff up to make ourselves look bigger and more dominating when we were under threat. So it's exactly what we're talking about. They're getting hair boners.
So now, let's circle back around to this idea of how to stop them. Yeah. How to stop assholes.
Glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I was also going to ask you about Putin, your thoughts on his. He certainly has a different personality than Trump, or than they share
different flavor. I'm not sure that
they have a different flavor. Yeah, they have a different
the same
flavor.
MO.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trump is not Hitler, but not because he wouldn't want to be. I'm not saying that he's anti-Semitic. He probably is, but that's only in the surface. If he could get more likes by being Jew defending, he'd do that. That's not. It's irrelevant.
That would be a belief. That would be a belief. He doesn't have that belief.
No, he doesn't have that belief. He's not Hitler, but only because it's America. You got to go a little slower here.
It's a different situation.
Different situation. That's right. Give him time. You have some patience. Show a little patience. Yeah. But how you stop them, it makes my skin crawl to see how we do. We act as though they are saying things, not just braying. And we enable them. It's a fundamental rule in dealing with psychopaths. You do not ask them, do they mean it? You do not engage with their content. They're operating on a different level. So I have two arguments about that, one of which I've already touched on, how you stop an asshole. And by the way, I'm not saying this is a surefire method. Like I said earlier, they're designed to make it so nothing works. So if someone says, well, don't do that, that won't work, do this. No, that won't work either. That's the point. That's what they're designed to do.
It's existential, this is you're stopping them is an existential threat. So they're going to bring
them.
Everything
that's right.
They
yeah,
possibly can.
So the first one is don't debate them. They're just baiting to you taking the bait. That's what I mean by that turn of phrase. And what you do instead is you call them on the move, relentlessly.
Right.
And to do that in front of an audience helps. The other thing that I argue is, and this is basically preventative, to prevent you from enabling them, they will act like they are moral authorities. They love to play supreme judge over a debate in which they are merely one of the advocates. So they're always sidling up into the judge's seat. And they are spinning at you anything that they can make sound shameful. And if you take that bait, you are lost. You will lose. So when a Trump supporter or someone else, a leftist, let's say, a far leftist, calls me a name caller, I say, of course I name call. Everybody does. You just called me a name caller. That's name calling. The difference between us is that you pretend you live by this bogus standard, whereas I'm trying to figure out how to name call surgically. I want to name call where it helps, not where it hurts. If they say, you're unkind, I say, yes, of course I'm unkind, as are you. Or if they try to shame me for shaming, or any of these other hypocritical moves, where they're playing fundamentalists that they're not living by. You couldn't live by those rules. Just like you couldn't live by the rule to always be conservative. You can't conserve everything. Things change. So you don't take your moral advice from people who have earned the right to do that. Because these guys are going to play Pope when they've lost every possible leg to stand on. So this is what makes my skin crawl, to be watching us still debating these people. They lost their credibility years ago. And yet the news, so not once since Trump came down the escalator has anybody called him out to his face over this fundamental move. The late night comedians are masters of calling out this move behind his back. No one gets audience with Trump now, and it's even worse with Putin. When they go low, you go high was disastrous for us. And we're still living with that. Because when they go low and high, you go meta. Meta meaning you go above the whole thing and say, you don't mean anything you're saying. This guy doesn't, better to talk about him in the third person. This guy doesn't mean a word he's saying. He's just playing this game. Watch how it plays. Observe what he's doing. He's only got this move. It's the one thing he's got. He's a one-trick phony. He's got nothing. He's got nothing but this one move. And you're a fool if you believe he's got anything more than that going on, because the pattern is so straightforward. I've talked to AI experts out here about designing a Trump bot. That is, it would take very little coding to create a computer that generates responses like his. They're entirely predictable.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And when you
Jeremy,
call them on it, they will respond in a way. It's what we used to call a tar baby. That is, no matter how you respond to it, you get stuck to it better. You get more stuck to it. That the original name from African folklore, where this was a big deal, was gum baby. So I call it gum babying. So you try to attack. If I said you're being defensive, there's no response you could give that wouldn't either stay neutral on it or affirm it. It's in that, and I consider this immoral with decent people, but absolutely essential with these guys. So you say, see what you did here, and there's no way he can respond that won't prove you right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's these are early days, just like it's early days for dealing with the climate crisis. We're just coming up with the technology. I think these are early days for psychoproctology. That's the best I've come up with so far. I dedicate my book to future psychoproctologists who will do a better job than I do at it. These are early days in trying to figure out how to answer this fundamental question: how do you humbly humble someone who will say or do anything to avoid humility? So it's the existential question for life. So you got to do it humbly. That is, I don't get to grandstand and beat him. That won't work. You can't do that with these guys unless you're willing to become an equal and opposite asshole. And even then, it'll just end up in bickering. But so how do you humble them?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I really wish my dad were still alive, because he was a psychoproctologist. He had a facility with language that, he was never mean-spirited, which is ability to do just that, humiliate those who needed it, who demanded it.
So he was able to do that. That's very interesting. So he was able to do that, and at the same time show a kind of allow someone their dignity while taking them out at the knees somehow. Yeah,
the idea being that if people could recognize the least painful way that they can recognize what they're doing and correct it, the better. There's no taste for humiliation as an end unto itself.
Right. That's right.
Plus, this person is here for a reason. If they're in your life and you're in theirs, what's better, to adjust the dynamic or to have a very strained and So it really was a marvelous thing to see. But I don't know.
I call this Gen 3.0, maybe 4.0. Is someone who studies, as your dad did, that challenge and figures out how to maximize honesty while maintaining intimacy. That you want to be in with that person, you don't want to be bounced out. This is especially hard with assholes because they will bounce you out the second that you give them any honest opinion that challenges them. But anyway, with normal people, the goal would be to maximize honesty subject to intimacy. You're trying to make it so the rapport gets stronger and stronger, how you maintain credibility while being honest, not just by pandering, not just by affirming. And I would say the same dance is the challenge of partnership, which is too complicated for me. I retired from partnership about 8 years ago. I'm great for friendship, but I'm not. I had a great run, and I'm glad that my lack of appetite finally caught up with my lack of aptitude. I just ended up in this life where honesty matters to me more, and so at some point I'm no fun.
Yeah.
My friends like me.
I don't know. This has been a lot of fun. This has been a lot of fun, Jeremy. I really enjoy this kind of conversation. I don't know, where we go. We barely got away with, with getting Trump out of office. Just as one example. That's just one example, right. And I don't mean to single him out as the only or the biggest asshole.
I'd feel the same way about a leftist who made his moves. I mean, I tend to prefer progressive policies by a lot, and like I say, I worked for years on. But a friend and I talked about whether we would support a leftist who was doing Trump's move. I don't think I could stomach it. I wouldn't
No,
even
of
be able
course
to pull
not.
off the thing that the MAGA people do, where they say, "Well, he's a complete impulsive fool who makes lousy decisions, but I have to support him because I like his decisions." You get that all the time
Yeah.
from Trump supporters.
Yeah.
It's a way of claiming virtue while still supporting something absolutely appalling. But where we go
Well,
with it is a big question.
Yeah.
Where we end up with it. And I have, so I'm good friends with another fellow Jew who is 92, Dan Ellsberg. He's a local guy, the guy who did the Pentagon Papers.
Yes,
And
yes.
we talk about it. He says he had no effect on policy, even though he's considered one of the heroes of the movement for his effect on policy.
Right.
But we both agree that it has no effect on our motivation. There's a reason I could read an awful lot of just terrible news, is that my motivation is decoupled from our current situation. Obama said it well. He said it's not the end of the world till the end of the world.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, it's not like I have to read only good news in order to keep myself motivated.
Sure.
It seems the obvious thing to work on if you've got any attention for it. And so I recommend everybody become a psychoproctologist. I assume everybody is a beginner at it. That's why I call my book Advanced Psychoproctology for Beginners. That's we're all in the game of diagnosing assholes, but I don't think we've gotten very sophisticated about it. What is a butthead, since it can't be just whomever you happen to butt heads with? That's the question.
Right. Well, it's certainly worth poking around, and I think that there's plenty of the tsuris, as we would say, floating around the world, and plenty of the threats to sanity, to existence.
Yeah.
It's all up for grabs. I said to a guest yesterday, if we acknowledge how tiny we are in the scheme of things, it should take some of the pressure off. We don't have to agonize over any of this in the scheme of things.
We didn't make this place.
Yeah, I didn't make this place, and I didn't. I do feel grateful that I didn't fall for some of the stuff that some other people fell for.
Yes.
But I'm not judging them for. I don't judge somebody for falling, tripping over a rock. It's like it happened. Now, they'll get it. They'll get it right in the next go round. Who knows what they'll come back as, or what will happen? What will happen in the world's evolution and rebirth and whatnot? We'll keep coming back until we just like in Albert Brooks' Defending Your Life, the movie Defending Your Life, until we overcome our fears. And that's all it is. It's just fears. It's not stupidity, anger, whatever. I think fear is the big one. I always talk about it. I was when I saw your name, I was thinking of the satirist and comedian writer Alan Sherman. Alan Sherman was
not related, but yes,
but a big favorite of mine because he was able to kind of make fun of the things that he loved, and
that's irony.
And that's
Don
what
Nichols'
is.
Yes, those Jewish, the Borscht Belt comedians mostly got it right. Yes. And yet, do you have friends from your yeshiva days who ended up being Trumpists?
Yeah, I do.
Pretty much all of mine. All of my best friend from elementary school did. No, a virulent rabbi. Complicated. Yeah, and how to not blame them and still make them pay the price is your dad's question.
Well, they're going to pay the price. We're not exacting the price. So
no. That's.
But you mean not? Let
I wish
them off
that
the
were
hook?
true.
Or you
that is, I know that. I am very confident that a Trump administration will fail miserably. Whether they take everybody else down with them, that is, you can't be big and unrealistic for long. That doesn't work.
Right.
But the question for me is whether they'll take everybody else down with them, and that's a perfectly valid question these days. Putin, the same way. That is it.
Yeah, and if they do, we don't get any real benefit from that, do we? Because we all go down. So
that's my point. Live and let live is a breeze as long as you don't have to live with the people. But we have to live with these people and their decisions, and that means that it's pretty costly.
Yeah. I think I still harbor some of my my father's perhaps impractical, though sometimes accurate, feelings that that people can learn, that if people are deep down decent, they can learn the lesson without completely self-destructing or destroying others.
Yeah,
now I'm not talking about Trump. I mean, those people are not the ones who matter. The people who matter are the ones who are worth saving.
Yeah, that gets complicated, but your operative term there is if, and there are plenty of people who die before they've hit rock bottom. But one quote from a psychologist I like a lot is, the instinct to survive is strong. The instinct to alleviate fear is stronger. Mm-hmm. And I think that relates to what you're talking about.
Well, I'll let it go on that. And
right.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation.
I'm very glad.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.